Hey class, I'm excited to share this paper with you. You guys actually encouraged me to pursue this topic when we spent some time together during the hybrid weekend, just the questions we were asking about truth and about Nietzsche, and Amber's statement that we need to say yes and no to Nietzsche sent me home asking a lot of questions about truth, desire to pursue better understanding the world in which we live, and embracing the questions that are asked. I think that's important for believers because Nietzsche said that there can be no objective truth. There is no objective knowledge of objective truth because there's no God's eye view of reality. And that was the main critique that he had against Christianity. He attacked over and over again in the Antichrist this idea that Christianity is rooted in the beyond, rooted in this idea that we can understand reality as objective. And he laughed at that thought. So what do we do with that as believers? Can we know truth? That's kind of the question I pursued in this paper, and I came out saying yes. I think as Christians we have to say that. One of the phrases that Dr. Dew instilled in me my first semester at Southeastern is to have a faith-seeking understanding. One of the big things I couldn't understand is how do we connect philosophy with theology? Thinking well, thinking philosophically, and thinking biblically and theologically. How do we connect them? Faith-seeking understanding. We have a faith in God and His Word, and it's from those ideas and those beliefs that we think well and philosophize about the world in which we live. So having a faith-seeking understanding, we see right in Genesis 1, it doesn't take very long to get to God's created reality. He has created a reality independent of himself that really does exist. And he gives commands. He says that it's good. He talks, and it's assumed all throughout Scripture, all throughout the narrative of Scripture, that there is an objective reality, an independent reality. This is important for setting up truth, to first establish that there is something to be true. And then second, we begin to ask, what do we do with this reality? Can we know it? This is where the big questions come in. I call in the paper the deception of perception, kind of the first hurdle. What do we do with perception? What do we do with people who are colorblind or people who maybe perceptually their senses don't see reality in the same way that we do? Or what about those lenses that aren't just in our senses but are imbibed socially and culturally and historically? What do we do with those? Because Nietzsche's kind of right. We are situated in a very finite place. We are situated culturally and historically in one place. We're fixated in history. So what do we do with that? Well, I think we need to have the guts to say that Nietzsche got some things right. We are limited. We are finite. But that embracing finitude shouldn't lead to the overthrow of objectivity. That shouldn't lead to the overthrow of truth. I think that's a gross overreaction. Dr. Dew talks in his book about epistemology, this idea of virtue epistemology, that we need to be humble thinkers. And I think as Christians, first of all, we should be humble all the time, but also especially in our knowledge, understanding that it is difficult to know, understanding that we are limited and finite. But also, J.P. Moreland and William Lane Craig make a great distinction between two different kinds of objectivity, psychological and rational. Psychological is the absence of bias. Rational is the ability to discern good and bad reasons for believing truth. Now, they make an incredible distinction that it is possible to have rational objectivity even in the midst of having bias. Even if we lack psychological objectivity, even if we have bias about a topic, we can still have the ability to discern good and bad reasons for believing truth. This is so important as we pursue a knowledge of that truth because it's giving us confidence to say, wait, I really can know this. My bias doesn't keep me from knowing objective truth because like we saw in Genesis, there is an objective reality to be known. Moving on in the study, it kind of seems like if you take Nietzsche's thoughts to his logical conclusions, you kind of end up at this form of relativity. Or if you take Kant's ideas that we can't know things in themselves, only things as they appear to us, well, it seems like what if everything appears to me differently? Then we end up in relativism. We end up not just in epistemological relativism, but moral relativism like we see today, this idea that gender is whatever you perceive it to be. Gender for you is whatever you desire it to be, whatever you self-identify with. Was that true? I know on the one hand, relativity can't be true because it doesn't match up with reality, the reality that we've already laid the groundwork for. Because I cannot both be at Southeastern at 6 p.m. tonight and in my home in Metro Atlanta at 6 p.m. tonight. That is an actual impossibility in the world. I can only be in one place at one time. So to say that I'm at both is a lie, which is to say that there is the opposite of a lie, which is truth. So there must be some truth to this reality we live in. What is this truth? This is the big question, right? Well, truth is that which corresponds to reality. Truth is the language we use to describe God's reality. And one way to talk about this truth while still embracing the fact that we know there are biases and limitations to our knowledge is by talking about it in the form of critical realism. It's a narrow path to walk, and there's ditches on both sides, but it can be done. We can wholeheartedly admit that there are some things we have trouble knowing, but we can also stand confidently in God's created reality, knowing that He created it, knowing that it exists, and knowing that we can know it. So maybe I'll post the paper, maybe you guys can read it and get a fuller sense of my argument and some of the things that I walk through. But I hope this encourages you, and I hope it encourages all of us as believers that we can know objective truth. And I hope it encourages us to think well as we engage unbelievers and thinkers in our world today. Love you guys. It's been an awesome semester. Have a great day and a great summer.